What's that bandage style? Cold War edition? They laughed. She didn't. While wrapping a cadet's arm with quiet precision, her left sleeve slipped and everything changed. What they saw wasn't just a scar, it made the room fall silent, and within seconds the doors locked. No warnings, no commands, just a scar, and the look on her face, like she'd been waiting for this. She didn't raise her voice, but something buried deep had just surfaced. You're watching Veteran Biker. Tell us where you're watching from, and subscribe for more. The training field behind Echo-7 barracks always smelled like scorched polymer, burnt drills, synthetic smoke, and metal sweat. Recruits stumbled through the last phase of the simulation, breathing hard through filtered masks, their uniforms half-charred by proximity blasts. It was standard protocol, controlled chaos, engineered injuries. One cadet didn't time his roll. He hit the dirt with a loud yelp as a flash unit discharged near his left boot. The exposed edge of a smoke panel singed his sleeve, and a blistering red welt flared along his forearm. Not critical, but enough to stop the exercise. "Injury on Sector 3, someone called out. From the edge of the drill zone, Mira Lawson moved. She wasn't fast, but the way she moved cut through the noise, efficient, quiet. Her grey uniform, worn and nondescript, flared only slightly at the boots. Hair pulled back tight. Clipboard slung under one arm. She carried no visible rank, and yet nobody told her to hurry. A field tech held back a medic drone, glancing toward her. "She's got it!" The cadet sat upright, gritting his teeth. He couldn't have been more than 19. The welt was ugly, shallow, and angry. Mira knelt beside him without speaking, unbuckled her kit with a mechanical flick. "Hold still." Her voice was low, almost bored. "Cold War style," muttered one of the observing trainers. He snorted. "Look at that technique. She's actually wrapping gauze by hand." Another added, "Did she serve with dinosaurs?" A few of the younger cadets chuckled. One of them, taller, sharper, trying to impress, leaned over, smirking. "What's that bandage style, Cold War edition?" Mira didn't flinch. She continued winding the wrap with steady pressure, clean corners. The injured cadet shifted, wincing. "You okay?" she asked, not looking up. "Yeah," he mumbled, then hesitated. "Thanks." She finally glanced at him, just briefly, then turned her eyes to the burn. "There's more under the sleeve," she murmured. Before he could react, she tugged his cuff higher. The synthetic fabric caught on the skin. He jerked slightly, but she was careful, experienced. Her hand guided the material up to expose the full extent of the injury. And that's when her own sleeve shifted. The cadet's eyes widened first, then the one standing behind her. "What the hell is that?" Her entire left arm, from shoulder to wrist, was marked by a massive burn pattern. Not pink, not red, charred, textured. It looked almost designed. A silence spread outward like shockwaves. Mira didn't react. But the biometric scanner embedded in the edge of the training pad did. An audible chime rang out, sharp, alien. Red text flickered across a status panel mounted on a nearby pylon. Red scan triggered. Class B survivor code detected lockdown protocol. Level 4. Initiated authorizing entity match. EC-09 Alpha around them. Security gates slammed shut with pneumatic shrieks. Doors along the facility edge are sealed. Warning lights pulsed along the horizon. The trainers stopped laughing. A captain's voice cut through the overhead comm. "Medical sector, freeze all movement. Stay where you are. We have a live classification breach." Mira slowly stood. She adjusted the sleeve back down. The burn was gone from sight, but not from memory. Not anymore. Colonel Ridley was already in motion. He hadn't even seen the broadcast yet. He didn't need to. The alert ping on his secure wristband hit a code he hadn't heard in over 15 years. EC-09 Alpha. He moved through corridors with uncanny speed for a man his age, passing startled officers and sealed checkpoint doors. His voice unlocked a dozen barriers. His clearance opened the rest. The medical field deck was locked in full stasis. Automated response units stood by, blinking. Through a triple-layer glass partition he saw her. Mira Lawson. She stood in the center of the drill zone. No one approached her. The young cadet she had treated was now surrounded by guards being scanned for contamination. Ridley stared at her left arm. Even covered, he could see the sleeve had moved. Bring her to processing 7, alone, no restraints. The officer beside him hesitated. Sir, protocol. I said no restraints. He tapped his console. In a sealed archive deep beneath the operations wing, a file lit up red. EC-09, Redacted Strike Event Survivor, Mira Lawson. Status, suppressed classification. Do not engage. He had been there. He had signed the suppression, and now, somehow, the one woman who was never supposed to surface again was standing in the light. In the waiting room outside processing 7, Mira sat with her hands on her knees. She didn't ask questions. She didn't blink. She only stared at the wall across from her, a wall lined with names. She knew every one of them, because she had tried to save them all, and failed. Now someone had pulled her back into a world that once erased her, that once left her for ashes. This time she wouldn't speak. She didn't need to. Her scar would do the talking. Processing room 7 wasn't built for comfort. Bare concrete walls, a single table with integrated scan panels, no windows, only one chair bolted to the floor. The lights were too white, too clear, designed to reveal more than they should. Mira Lawson sat, hands folded. Colonel Ridley entered alone. For a long moment he didn't speak, just watched her. 15 years. 15 years since the Ember Claw strike. Classified, buried and burned from every official record. And yet here she was, as real as the scar under her sleeve. He broke the silence. I thought you were dead. Mira didn't respond. I signed the report myself. Still nothing. Ridley took a step closer. You shouldn't have survived. That strike was designed to vaporize everything in a 2-kilometer radius. We couldn't even recover bone fragments. I wasn't supposed to survive, she said finally. Her voice hadn't aged. Calm, cool, deliberate. But I did. He studied her. That scar triggered a red-level scan. The system read you as a survivor of a non-existent strike. I didn't expect to be recognized. Not anymore. You were never officially removed, just overwritten. Mira's eyes flicked up. And now? Ridley exhaled. Now, every biometric system within 100 clicks is trying to reconcile your existence with a file that says you don't. She said nothing. He stepped around the table, swiped his console. A holomap of Ember Claw flickered into view. Burn radius, blast vectors, last known personnel locations. Then, a match overlay. Mira's scar pattern glowed, line for line, against the blast data. Perfect correlation, Ridley muttered. Down to the vascular trauma index. It's not just identification, it's forensic resonance. It hurt like hell, she said softly. Still does. He paused. There's one more thing. He tapped a command. The system blinked, then presented a long-suppressed log entry. Audio log, EC-09, Field Unit Beta, Operator Voice, Distorted Strike Vector confirmed. Target green, Drop Zone locked. Unknown female voice, panicked negative. That's friendly. I repeat, friendly. Strike abort. Abort, signal cut. Ridley looked at her. That's your voice. Mira didn't flinch. I tried to stop it. He nodded slowly. I remember. We were scrambled that day. Communications were jammed. Someone overrode protocol. She said, someone signed the order. He said nothing. Mira leaned back, exposing her left arm fully. The sleeve slipped down. The scar was ugly, twisted, layered with embedded data fragments that still shimmered faintly under the table's scan field. You knew I was alive, she said, didn't you? Ridley stared. Only fragments came through. The report said no full survivors. It was politically cleaner that way. Mira's voice didn't rise. You mean quieter? Ridley's jaw clenched. She stood. You buried 9 names. You buried mine. But you forgot that fire leaves marks. His voice cracked slightly. I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. The room went still. A moment later, the door chimed. A young officer entered, holding a data pad. Sir, Command just received a full system echo match from her arm. Not just from EC-09, but from her medlog. Ridley frowned. What kind of match? The officer hesitated. Video, sir, recovered from a fragmented biometric cam. And audio. She recorded the whole thing. Mira didn't look surprised. Ridley turned to her. You had a recorder embedded? In my sleeve lining? Standard for field medics in blackout zones. You knew that. He nodded slowly. I did. The officer whispered, We've got movement from Central Command. They've activated a closed council. Orders to keep her off-grid until further notice. Ridley sighed. That's a mistake. Mira turned to the officer. Do you have a mirror? The young man blinked. Ma'am? She held up her arm. The scar reflected slightly under the LED strips. I just want to see what they're all so afraid of. The officer glanced at Ridley. Give her one, he said. The boy left. Mira sat again, staring at her arm, not with fear, with memory. Elsewhere in the base, a private room darkened. A red panel blinked. Encrypted. High command clearance only. Inside, a general leaned forward. He had grey hair, clean ribbons, a nameplate that read Holland. He watched the scar scan repeat again and again. His hand hovered over the lock file button. He didn't press it, not yet. Back in Processing 7, Mira finally broke the silence. I want the list of names. Ridley met her gaze. The dead? The erased. He nodded slowly. They're on file, buried under training casualty metadata, all tagged unspecified atmospheric event. I know their real names. He pulled a chip from his coat, set it on the table. That's all of them. And the one you saved. She didn't touch it. I didn't save him. Ridley said nothing, but they both knew who he meant. And where was this going next? The chip lay on the table like a silent accusation. Mira stared at it without blinking. Colonel Ridley remained standing, arms crossed, but the stiffness in his shoulders betrayed tension. The kind that came not from fear of Mira herself, but of what her presence would force to the surface. She finally picked up the chip. The base scanner synced instantly, projecting a ring of names in mid-air. They shimmered like ghosts. Private Callan, Specialist Yue, Sergeant Alvarado, Lieutenant Mera, and then, last in the list, Commander Ellis V. Holland. Mira's jaw tensed. Ridley spoke quietly. You dragged him out, through the ash. He coded twice in the evac shuttle. You kept him alive. Her voice was low, and he signed the redaction. Ridley nodded. He did. Mira's lips compressed into a thin line. For 15 years, she had carried the weight of those names, not just the dead, but the condemned, forgotten. And now, one of them sat at the top of the chain of command. In Central Command, Ellis Holland leaned back from the projection. The room was empty except for encrypted displays, sealed comms, and his silence. He watched Mira's scar profile rotate on repeat. Then the recovered audio, her screaming into the static, trying to cancel the strike. His face remained unreadable. Then he stood, walked to the back wall. A secure locker recognized his ID and opened. Inside, a set of Black Ops gear, folded, untouched since Emberclaw. He stared at it for a long time, then shut the door and called for a shuttle to Echo 7. In Processing 7, Mira stood now. She looked at Ridley. What happens next? He hesitated. Technically, protocol says you're to be held for command review, but no one ever expected a Class B survivor to reactivate. She raised an eyebrow. Meaning? Meaning there is no clear order to follow. Not unless command makes one up now. He tapped a panel, the door unsealed. 2 guards waited, uncertain. She's to be escorted to MedSec, not detention, full privileges. The guards blinked. One nodded. Mira stepped through the doorway. The air outside tasted colder. Her burn throbbed beneath the sleeve. Not with power, ut pressure, as if her body could feel the weight of what was coming. Cadet Toma waited by the MedSec hallway, the same one Mira had bandaged earlier. His arm was wrapped neatly. Her work. He looked nervous. When Mira passed, he straightened. "Ma'am," she paused. "Thank you," he said. She looked at his dressing, then back at his face. "You kept the wrap on?" He nodded quickly. "I didn't want them to replace it." She studied him for a second longer, then gave a single nod, then walked away. Inside MedSec, Mira stripped the upper layers of her uniform in silence. Alone, she faced the mirror. Her left arm, bare now, was a latticework of scorched tissue, deep patterning and raised ridges where blast pressure had carved through skin. But within the burns, something else had settled over time, a faint metallic glint like alloyed ash. Under the sterile overheads, her scar pulsed slightly, heat-reactive threads catching light. She reached out, touched the mirror. For a second, the reflected burn flared softly blue. She breathed, not steady, not shaky, just alive. Then the door chimed. Colonel Ridley again. He didn't enter fully, just lingered by the frame. "Commands en route." Holland himself. Mira looked at him through the mirror. "Good." Ridley didn't reply. Instead, he stepped aside and handed her something small, folded fabric, a medic's patch. "Yours. We recovered it from your old gear archive, never reassigned." She took it, looked at the faded symbol, a crimson cross embedded in a field of smoke grey. "I didn't think it still existed," she murmured. "Neither did I." She held it for a moment longer, then affixed it to her sleeve. Back in place. When Holland's shuttle touched down, no one saluted. Not because of disrespect, because they didn't know what to call him. General? Survivor? Ghost? He walked with deliberate calm through the base. Officers moved aside instinctively. In the command annex, Ridley met him halfway. "You've seen the footage," Ridley said. "I lived it," Holland answered. "She saved your life." "I know. She also watched you sign her silence." "I know that too." Ridley looked tired. "Then why are you here?" Holland stopped. "To see if I'm still the man she dragged out of the fire, or the one who buried her afterward." Ridley said nothing. Holland stepped past him, toward processing room 7, where Mira waited, toward the reckoning neither of them had avoided. Mira stood when Holland entered the room. She didn't salute. He didn't expect her to. For a long moment they simply looked at each other. The last time they had shared air, it had been thick with smoke, screams and blood. He had been unconscious. She had been trying to hold his chest together with one hand while calling in an evac that never came. Now there was no fire, just the cold hum of a sealed room and a silence even sharper than before. "You're still alive," he said. "So are you," she replied. Holland stepped forward. His movements were slow, deliberate, like a man walking across a minefield built by his own past. He looked down at her arm. "It didn't heal." "No," Mira said. "It didn't." He nodded. "But it survived." So did the truth. That landed harder than anything else so far. He didn't respond, just pulled a chair from the wall and sat across from her. The distance between them was surgical, exact, intentional. "I saw the footage," he said. "I recorded it. You knew it would be dangerous to keep. I also knew it would be worse if no one ever saw it." He leaned back slightly. "Do you know what happened after? I know I was declared non-viable, that you signed the suppression, that the file went black." Holland exhaled slowly. There was a political storm. The strike was meant to hit a rogue cell, Ig-value, off-grid. Intel said they'd embedded in that zone. She raised an eyebrow. Intel said wrong. He nodded. I was given a green light based on bad data. No time to verify. You screamed into the comm. I heard part of it. Then the blast hit. Mira's eyes didn't soften. And then I woke up 2 days later, debriefed, debranded, told there were no survivors, that the data cam had been destroyed. But it wasn't. He met her gaze. No, and I knew that. Silence. When I signed the suppression, I thought I was protecting the unit. You were protecting yourself. That one hit deep, he didn't deny it. I don't expect forgiveness. Good. They sat in the stillness of truths finally spoken. Then Holland did something Mira hadn't expected. He pulled a small vial from his inner coat pocket. It was scorched, old. Its glass darkened at the rim. She recognized it instantly. "You kept it," she whispered. He set it on the table. "It was in my vest. You put it there before the evac, my blood sample, from the field lab. I didn't want the system to misidentify you or rewrite your DNA." He looked down at the vial. "And yet they rewrote yours instead." She didn't reply. "I didn't come here to erase the past," Holland said. "I came to make sure it doesn't happen again." She studied him, not with hatred, not even resentment, but with the weary scrutiny of someone who had seen promises break before, then do something the system can't ignore. He tilted his head. "Like what?" She leaned forward. "Unredact EC-09. Release the survivor files. Let every ghost we buried have their name back." He didn't blink. "You think Command will allow that? I think you're the only one who can force it." He sat back, folding his hands. For a moment, he looked again like the commander she had dragged from fire. Not the politician, not the general. Then he said, "I'll call a tribunal." She gave him a look. "Not enough. I'll make it public." She didn't smile, but her silence this time had weight, agreement, acceptance. Then he added quietly, "And I'll put my name on the report." Mira stood. "So will I." Outside, Colonel Ridley waited. When the door opened and both walked side by side, the hallway froze. No orders were shouted, no weapons raised. Just stunned, absolute stillness. Mira walked ahead. Holland is beside her, toward command tower, toward the beginning of something none of them could yet name. Hours later, a classified terminal buzzed in the central archive. One file reappeared in the system, EC-09, Ember Claw, status, declassified survivor list, attached witness statements, 1 Lawson M or 1 Holland E. Within minutes, internal forums flared, comments, confessions, and names, once lost, began resurfacing. That night, Mira stood in the outer courtyard of Echo-7. The wind was soft, cool. The stars are unobstructed. She looked at her arm. The scar glowed faintly under ambient light. Not ugly, not erased, visible, remembered. In the hours that followed the declassification, Echo-7 base shifted in ways no memo could capture. Word spread fast, not officially, but through glances, half-finished sentences, terminals left unlocked just long enough for someone to read the headlines, EC-09, declassified. The base no longer treated Mira Lawson as a ghost. She walked the corridors unescorted, not because anyone ordered it, but because nobody dared stop her. Respect moved silently. Even those who once scoffed now stood a little straighter when she passed. But Mira wasn't interested in vindication. She wasn't looking for apologies. She had names to restore. Ridley provided her with access to the archive floor, a windowless wing beneath Central Command, where redacted files were stored in layers of encryption. There were no guards, only silent scanners that blinked green the moment she approached. Her scar did more than trigger lockdowns now. It opened doors. Deep in the archives, she began sifting through fragments, incomplete deployment logs, fractured comm transcripts, erased DNA traces. Every line of corrupted metadata represented a person the system had tried to forget. She began stitching them back together, not with hope, but with precision. The first name she restored was Yu, the second, Mera. As each record re-emerged, a thin strip of light illuminated the corridor wall outside. One for each name returned. Elsewhere, Holland faced the second phase of reckoning. Central Command didn't move quietly. A declassification of this scale triggered inquiries, reviews, and in some sectors, outrage. Commanders called him directly, demanding context. Why now? Why her? He gave no long explanations. Only this, because we can't ask people to serve a system that lies to its own. That answer cost him support, but it earned him something else. Silence. The kind that meant people were listening, even if they didn't admit it. Meanwhile, Mira's body began reacting to the new attention, not in fear but in tension. The burn on her arm, though decades old, pulsed more often now under sensor light. A medical scan confirmed something unexpected. Microscopic threads of carbon-titanium alloy embedded in her dermis had reactivated. Heat-reactive data, not implanted, but fused during the original blast. The Ember Claw strike hadn't just burned her, it had etched information into her skin. The scar wasn't a wound, it was a living file. Ridley stood beside the medical scanner, frowning. This wasn't in any report. Mira looked at the readout. Her vitals were stable, but the alloy threads displayed pulsing lines, like a waiting signal. Because no one thought to look, she said. They thought I was dead. They never checked what survived. Ridley exhaled. We need to scan it deeper. Full spectrograph, phase resonance, everything. She nodded. Do it. The scan took hours. When it ended, the data stunned even the most hardened analysts. Buried within the scar pattern was a timestamp, a geolocation, and a thermal signature, correlating precisely with the moment Mira had activated her field recorder during the strike. Somehow, the alloy within her skin had absorbed part of the recording. Her scar was not only physical proof of the incident, it contained a fragment of the event itself. When the spectrograph played the resonance back, audio pulsed through the room, her voice frantic, cutting through static. "Abort! Abort! That's friendly!" Then, silence followed by the unmistakable roar of impact. The playback hit everyone in the room like a shockwave. A junior analyst covered her mouth. One of the security officers turned away. No one spoke. Mira stood still. She'd heard it before, but this time they all heard it too. It didn't take long for that discovery to reach the Defense Oversight Council. Within 12 hours, Mira was summoned to a closed hearing, not for interrogation, but to testify. A survivor giving evidence from her own body. The council chamber was high above the Capitol, ringed with security drones and silent observers. Mira entered without a uniform, without rank. Just the scar exposed, her sleeve rolled up. No introductions were needed. A moderator gestured to the projection node. Mira placed her arm beneath it. The system synced instantly. The recording began. No music, no enhancements. Just the raw audio filtered through skin and alloy. Again her voice. Again the strike. And again silence. When the playback ended, no one moved for several seconds. Then a council member leaned forward. "Do you know how this happened?" Mira's reply was simple. The blast fused everything: fabric, metal, flesh. I was wearing the recorder in my sleeve. The alloy must have absorbed it. Another asked, "And why didn't you come forward sooner?" Her gaze didn't waver. "Because I was told I didn't exist." Silence again, but not resistance. Not anymore. By week's end, EC-09 was not only fully declassified, it was publicly archived. Memorials began appearing, names carved into steel plates, honor rolls adjusted, families contacted. Of the 14 listed as erased, 8 had surviving relatives who never knew the truth. Now they did. And Mira? She declined interviews, refused commendations. She returned to Echo 7 and resumed work at the medical bay. Cadets now greeted her differently, with nods, with quiet respect. Some approached her for training, others just sat nearby saying nothing. But the change was real. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridgeline, Mira stood alone on the outer landing pad. Her sleeve was rolled up. The wind caught the edge of her uniform. The scar glinted faintly in the fading light. Colonel Ridley approached. "They've offered you a permanent advisory role at Central," he said. "Full clearance. Authority over field medical ops." Mira didn't look at him. "That's not why I came back." He nodded. "I know. They buried my name," she said, "but I didn't come back to raise it. I came back so no one else would get buried." Ridley paused. "Then stay here." She finally turned. That was the plan, and somewhere in the distance, a cadet's training alarm rang. Another simulation, another chance to do it right. Mira lowered her sleeve, turned, and walked back inside. The scar stayed visible just a moment longer before disappearing into the uniform of someone who no longer needed to be remembered, because now she was seen. Echo 7 had changed. It didn't happen overnight, and it wasn't announced over comms or posted on a bulletin, but it was visible in the cadets who now watched their instructors more closely, in the officers who lowered their voices when they passed the medical wing, and in the silence that followed Mira wherever she went. It wasn't fear, it was recognition. People still didn't know what to call her. She wasn't ranked, she wasn't retired, she wasn't staff, not officially. But she was something else, something the system didn't have a label for. Mira Lawson had become a fixed point in a place built on rotation. She didn't speak about EC-09 unless asked. She didn't offer advice unless it was requested. But people began to seek her out anyway, not to hear the story, but to be near someone who'd survived one. Even the skeptical ones came sooner or later. Cadet Rios, who once laughed loudest, now volunteered for med drills. Lieutenant Bray, who had questioned the validity of burn residue as evidence, requested to audit her trauma rotation. Mira allowed it all, but kept her boundary firm. No reverence, no pity, just focus, just the work. That discipline was what drew the attention of the next wave, those beyond the base. Central Command sent observers, analysts, and even civilian liaisons. They all came with the same premise: to evaluate the aftermath of the EC-09 exposure, to study how institutional silence unraveled when confronted with undeniable proof. But Mira had no interest in being studied. She participated only where necessary, kept her responses short, and redirected every theoretical discussion back to field procedure. If they wanted to understand the consequences of silence, they could start by learning how to suture in a blackout tent. Then, one morning, an encrypted message arrived, addressed to her directly. No signature, no sender, just coordinates, a timestamp, and a designation: EC-09 Beta. Mira read it twice, then a third time. Her face didn't change, but inside something stirred. She took it to Ridley. He read it, looked up sharply. "No one outside command should know that designation," he said. Mira agreed. And yet the data was clean, fresh, not a trace of forgery. The timestamp was set for 48 hours later, near the ruins of a long decommissioned training site 3 zones east. Ridley tried to object. It could be a trap. Mira shrugged. "Everything worth finishing usually is..." He sighed. "I'll assign a team." She shook her head. "No teams, just backup frequency. You'll know if something goes wrong." 2 days later, Mira arrived at the site just after dusk. The training compound had long since been abandoned. Its domes collapsed, drills rusted, the ground scorched from past simulations. But the coordinates led her to a subterranean bunker, still sealed. Her scar, as always, did the work. The door unlocked on biometric contact. Inside, darkness, stillness, then a light. A terminal hummed to life. On screen, a voice-only prompt crackled into existence. Male, unfiltered. You made it. Mira said nothing. I watched your hearing. You spoke well. Truth doesn't need volume. She narrowed her eyes. Who are you? A survivor. Like you. No one else survived. That's what they told you. The screen flickered. A file opened. Visuals. Field footage from Ember Claw. Angles Mira hadn't seen. She leaned forward slowly. The footage wasn't hers. It came from a second cam. Same timestamp, different unit position. She saw herself in it, dragging Holland, signaling, burning. Where did you get this? She asked. I recorded it. From the beta sector. Mira went still. Your name. A pause. Then, Malik Drayton, former Recon, Shadow Group 3. She recognized the designation, an embedded recon cell that had operated near the fringe during EC-09. Their logs had been wiped, declared Mia. I saw what happened, the voice continued. I tried to reach command. Our link was cut. Then the strike fell. I barely made it out, crawled west for 2 days before evac. Why didn't you come forward? Mira's voice was sharp. They told me no one else lived, that I must have hallucinated the whole thing. Then they buried me in asset transfer. No records, no trace until I saw you. Mira paced once. Why reach out now? Because I kept my cam. And I still have my scars. But you lit the signal. You made them listen. He uploaded the full data. Mira watched it in silence. It confirmed everything. Angle, timeline, voice confirmation, another scar, another witness. Then he added, there's more. Ember Claw wasn't the only strike that went redacted. There's a pattern, and your scar. It's a key. Mira froze. What kind of pattern? Linked authorizations, same override signature, 3 other operations, similar survivor profiles, all disappeared. Where's the proof? In the metadata, embedded across the files. I found fragments, but I need your scan. Your resonance signature completes the cipher. She hesitated. You trust me? He asked. No, she replied. But I believe you bled. She placed her arm on the reader. The scan began. Outside, the wind shifted. Far above, satellites blinked active. Inside, a new file was decrypted, and for the first time, Ember Claw wasn't alone. When the scan finished, the data cascaded like rain through the decrypted terminal. Mira watched as lines of code, coordinates, and time-locked entries unfolded, each tied to a strike she'd never heard of. Malik's voice stayed steady. They called it Project Silo, not a code name, an acronym. Strategic Isolation and Lockout Operations. Every redacted strike fits the pattern. Same override channel, same survivor suppression protocol. Mira processed in silence. 3 other strikes, one in the TN range, another off the coast near Z Delta, the last buried deep in a transport corridor under the northern ice belt. Each strike is labeled under silo, each followed by personnel reassignment, file corruption, and biometric scrubs. Ember Claw hadn't been an accident, it was a precedent. Malik continued, your scan keyed the missing cipher. You were the only field asset marked final witness. They built the suppression logic around your telemetry, which means everything loops back to you. Mira leaned back. The weight of that knowledge didn't crush her. It clarified. For years she thought she was a fragment left behind, but now she understood. She had been the anchor. The silencing hadn't been random. It had been designed to bury her, because if she surfaced, so would everything else. We need to move fast, Malik said. The moment that scan completed, it triggered a satellite flag. Someone's watching. Mira nodded. Send it to Ridley, secure line, red level compression, then purge this terminal. Malik hesitated. Are you sure? We've done enough from here. They'll come looking. Back at Echo 7, Ridley was already reviewing the data when the alert hit. His screen pulsed with metadata: Silo 1, Silo 2, Silo 3, and now confirmed survivor correlation. Mira's resonance had validated the chain. God help us, he muttered. He didn't hesitate. The data was duplicated once, hard encoded to an isolated node, then disconnected. The purge cycle began seconds later. The response came faster than expected. Within 6 hours, Echo 7 received a flyover order from an unmarked surveillance craft. Not a drone. Manned. No insignia. It hovered for less than 2 minutes, scanned the facility perimeter, then vanished east. Ridley locked the base under Protocol Grey passive lockdown. All communications moved to internal burst codes. No outgoing transmissions. Mira returned before midnight. Her uniform smelled of carbon and wind. She said only, "They know." Ridley nodded. "I've scrambled the comm trees. You're off official logs again." "Good," Mira said. "We'll need the silence." The next day, Holland arrived without warning. He didn't use his official transport. No escort. Just a low-signature stealth carrier that touched down in a dead zone past the ridge. Mira met him at the gate. He didn't smile. "How bad is it?" She handed him a chip. "Read it yourself." He did. And for the first time since their confrontation, she saw hesitation in his eyes. "Silo was buried above my clearance," he said. "I'd heard rumors, but nothing this complete." Mira replied, "It's not just about what they buried. It's who they left alive." They gathered in the briefing room beneath Echo-7, the same room where cadets once ran drills and now stood guard in absolute silence. Ridley led the briefing with Holland seated at his left and Mira at his right. A holographic overlay displayed the silo chain. 3 strikes, Ridley began. Same authorization chain, same suppression algorithm. Each was followed by a manufactured casualty report. 0 survivors officially recorded. Holland frowned. "But there were survivors." Mira nodded. "Some buried, some discredited, some disappeared." Malik appeared on the secured screen. His face was now visible. Older than Mira remembered him from the Ember Claw logs, but intact. "The fragments we recovered show signs of internal routing, meaning someone from inside command oversaw the cover-ups." Holland exhaled. "We're dealing with a shadow protocol, possibly higher than joint ops, maybe even black budget autonomous." Mira looked at him. "Which means we'll never get authorization to expose it." Ridley tapped a command. "Then we don't ask, we show." The plan formed fast. Direct contact with the other survivor candidates, secure confirmation, and one action that would trigger visibility outside the chain, a controlled leak, not of data, but of voice. Mira's SCAR recording, coupled with Malik's footage, formed a biometric signature no algorithm could fake. If broadcast correctly, the signal would bypass redaction filters. The only problem, the beacon required activation from a high-clearance node. One is still buried in the northern transport corridor, the site of the final silo event. Mira stepped forward. "I'll go." Ridley objected immediately. "You've already been compromised once. If they catch your signal again..." "They already have it," she said. "I'm not hiding. Not this time." Holland added, "She's the only one who can trigger the beacon. It was coded to her telemetry." Ridley relented, but with conditions. "You don't go alone. Malik meets you at Corridor Echo-3. We'll prep a shadow carrier." The launch was silent. No comms, no signatures. Mira wore standard recon gear, but her left arm remained exposed under a heat-sealed wrap, tuned to activate the beacon only under direct biometric pressure. As the carrier moved north, she sat in silence, not reflecting, not praying, just ready. They landed outside Corridor Echo-3 beneath aurora-lit skies. The corridor was buried beneath a glacier shelf, accessible only by an elevator shaft that hadn't been touched in over a decade. Malik was already there, waiting beside a battered field unit. His eyes met hers. No words, just recognition. Together they descended. At the base of the shaft, the old infrastructure flickered alive. Dust, frost, silence. The walls still bore insignia from an era no one admitted existed. Mira stepped toward the activation pad. Her scar pulsed once, then again. The system recognized her instantly. Witness code verified. Silo chain complete. The beacon flared. Data surged. Every file, every timestamp, every lie, it went live. And somewhere far above, in servers hidden beneath the ocean, a red light turned green. The moment the beacon fired, the system woke up. Across secure networks, nodes once dormant lit up with priority pings. Redacted pathways blinked open, and in classified bunkers from every corner of the defense grid, terminals that hadn't seen light in over a decade came to life. At first it looked like a data anomaly. Impossible timestamps, long-deleted asset tags, protocol overlaps that defied current code. But then the signal verified itself. Biometric match Mira Lawson. Field-coded survivor ID. Tier 0 authentication. Undeniable. Inside the Arctic corridor, Mira stood with her arm still pressed to the panel. The beacon's pulse faded, but her heart didn't slow. Malik watched the data surge stabilize. "It's out," he said, "and it's echoing." Mira lowered her sleeve. "Then let's vanish before it bounces back." They retraced their path to the elevator shaft, ascending fast and silently. No alarms, no interception. Just the quiet before a different kind of storm. At Echo -7, Ridley stood in the command center, surrounded by silent terminals. Then, one by one, alerts began to bloom across the screen. Not red, not hostile, green. Verification requests from across the system, base to base, server to node. Not a lockdown, a response. Holland entered as the first wave hit. "It's working," Ridley said. "They're listening." Holland stared. "That's not listening, that's movement." Within 6 hours, 11 independent bases initiated internal audits. 4 major military academies reopened closed cases. An oversight council in the Southern Theater voted to freeze reassignments tied to suppressed operations. Across secure forums, threads appeared from personnel who once served under blackout orders. They shared fragments, timelines, and names. Survivors began naming themselves. Mira and Malik returned under the cloak, their craft rerouted through non-military channels, logged as a weather survey. They touched down in a dust storm and walked into base unannounced. No one stopped them. No one needed to. Mira didn't report in. She went straight to the archive floor, not to hide, to wait, not for orders, for what would come next. It didn't take long. 2 days later, a private envoy arrived, not from command, from the Department of Record Integrity, a division so far off-chain that even Holland hadn't seen their personnel in years. Their lead representative wore no insignia, just a plain black badge with a blue pulse ring. They didn't threaten, didn't question. They requested a conversation. Mira agreed. The meeting took place in a sealed observation room. Present, Mira, Ridley, the envoy, and a single transcription drone. The envoy began, "You've broadcast evidence that restructured 4 decades of operational narrative. You've undermined a silencing protocol built across 3 administrations." Mira remained silent. The envoy continued, "We are not here to punish, we are here to understand." Mira finally spoke, "Then listen." She told them everything, not just Emberclaw, not just Silo, but what did it mean to be buried and brought back, to wake up erased, to rebuild your own name piece by piece from the edges of burnt data. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't dramatize, just facts. But each word carried the weight of survival, the kind no report could fake. When she finished, the envoy nodded. Your actions exposed systemic failure, but more than that, they showed the limit of redaction. People remember what code forgets. Ridley asked, so what happens now? The envoy looked at Mira. You can walk away. You've already done more than most. But if you stay, you'll need to lead. Lead what? She asked. A reconstruction effort, a retrieval and restoration of every operation that was wiped under silo. That means personnel, records, memorials, recognition, justice where possible. Mira didn't answer right away. She looked at Ridley, then down on her arm. The scar had faded slightly in color, but not in pattern. She could still trace the waveform, still feel the heat sometimes. I'll help rebuild, she said, but not as a figurehead, not in a tower. The envoy tilted their head. Then how? As a medic, on the ground, wherever they buried someone, I'll be there to unearth them. The envoy stood. Then we have what we need. Before leaving, they placed a device on the table, a small sealed drive. This contains the first wave of recovered logs, 57 operations, thousands of names. Some survived, most didn't, but they'll be remembered now. Because of you, they exited. Mira looked at the drive, then at Ridley. He said, you just rewrote history. She replied, no, I just made it stop lying. Later that night, Mira walked the perimeter of Echo-7, not in patrol, in reflection. Above her, the stars were clean. The wind didn't bite. In the distance, she could hear cadets running evening drills, real drills, with full med protocols and blackout failure simulations, things that hadn't existed before she returned, not because of her, because of the truth she carried. On the east wall of the base, someone had hung a steel plaque. It wasn't official, no stamp, no emblem. Just 4 words etched in old field script, scars are evidence, not error. Mira paused in front of it. Then, for the first time since Ember Claw, she smiled. 3 weeks after the Department of Record Integrity visit, Echo-7 was no longer just a base. It was a relay. What had started as a containment facility became a processing node for the newly unburied. The first survivors arrived in silence. Some walked in through side gates, escorted by nervous handlers. Others came alone. No salutes, no announcements, just faces that matched names once thought deleted. Mira watched them from the archway above MedSec. Every one of them bore something familiar. Burned traces, fractured gait, the silent way their eyes moved like radar. These were not victims, they were proof. Ridley set up what he called a silent office, 1 room, 1 door, no ranks. Survivors walked in, gave their name, and were handed a chair and water. No questions, no forms, just presence. Some cried, some shook, most just sat. Mira was there for every intake. She said little. Sometimes she didn't say anything at all, but she stayed. That was enough. Then came the first false survivor. He arrived with papers, a burn on his shoulder, a fabricated transcript. Mira spotted the inconsistency within seconds. The scar was too clean, no data distortion, no carbon thread, and he wouldn't meet her eyes. She said 1 word, no. The man froze. Ridley had him removed, no spectacle, but the message was clear. Not every wound made someone a witness, and Mira Lawson could tell the difference. The work expanded. A mobile restoration team was formed, headed by Mira and Malik. They traveled to other bases, old silos and decommissioned corridors. The goal wasn't just names, it was people, stories. Every site had ghosts that systems refused to log, but Mira didn't rely on terminals. She looked for signals in what had been left behind: cracked medic packs, melted dog tags, obsolete field notes hidden under floor panels. She treated each like a patient, not to cure, but to acknowledge. One mission took them to a tundra post south of Vesta. The site had been listed as an atmospheric collapse drill, but Mira's scar reacted before they even stepped through the outer shell. Heat signature, match, embedded record from a secondary strike, Silo -4, previously unconfirmed. Inside, they found 2 partial body logs and a portable cryocache, never inventoried. Within it, a name tag, rank junior operative, name Z. Wells. Malik stared. That wasn't on any list. Mira nodded. Now it is. They brought it back. Logged it, restored it. Within hours, a retired technician watching the archives feed recognized the name. She called in, said she'd trained Zahara Wells before the blackout. The woman cried for 10 minutes without speaking. That night, Mira sat alone outside the hangar. Her left arm was bare again, not for scanning, for air. The skin still flared under the wind sometimes. The data within it hummed low like a deep current. She didn't mind it anymore. Holland arrived without warning. He sat beside her, not speaking. After a while he said, "You're making something permanent." She replied, "I'm just making things visible." He looked at her scar. "You know, they want to build a monument. Somewhere public. Use your name." Mira shook her head. "No statues." He didn't press. "Then what would you build?" She thought for a moment. "A clinic, with no door locks, no ranks, just open space, and enough light so no one ever feels buried again." Holland nodded. "We can do that." She didn't look at him, then do it without asking. Later, Ridley brought her an updated manifest. Over 200 names were entered into the system, some with full files, others are just initials and fragments, but all logged, all seen. And at the bottom of the list, someone had added a field, Witness Lawson M. She smiled, not for pride, for accuracy. The storm came without warning. It wasn't the other. It wasn't violence. It was silence, the kind that falls when too many high places go quiet at once. 3 weeks after Zahara Wells's record resurfaced, Mira noticed a shift. The usual flow of recovered data slowed. Archive logs stalled mid-transfer. Communications from certain zones returned error codes not tied to network failure, but MTO annual lockdown. Ridley confirmed it first. Central has pulled 3 base clusters into strategic audit. That's not protocol, that's containment. Holland added, "There's pressure somewhere above GRI. I'm seeing reroutes that don't match any open initiative." Malik dug deeper. What he found chilled them all, a shadow process labeled Razor Path, tagged to the same override signature from Silo, but this time with active deployment flags, not deletion, suppression. They weren't erasing the past anymore. They were trying to stop the present, and Mira Lawson was now listed as a Category 7 interference agent, target for containment, non-lethal if possible, but clear removal authorized. Ridley shut down Echo 7's external feeds within the hour. Every outbound channel shifted to air-gapped burst logs. Mira went mobile again, but this time not to restore names, to protect them. Survivors already processed were relocated to civilian shelters. Others were cut from public archives, resaved on drives distributed across 5 independent nodes. Holland made calls he wasn't supposed to have access to. Some were ignored, others answered with deadlines. But one came back in the clear, a signal from an old Intel contact codenamed Sable, embedded inside Strategic Logistics Command. Sable confirmed Razorpath's intention. They can't afford another wave. Silo 5 exists. It was activated 3 years ago. You expose that, the whole table flips. Mira asked, "How do we find it?" Sable sent coordinates. Northern Rim, below a weapons archive long presumed sealed. You'll need ground access and speed once it pings their drone's launch. Mira didn't hesitate. She chose Malik and 2 others from the recovery team. No official authorization, no call to Ridley, Not until they were already in motion. Holland sent backup silently, a stealth medic drone loaded with Mira's scar resonance to spoof entry protocols. The insertion went clean. High-altitude glide, low signature drop, descent through an avalanche-scarred corridor. They breached the outer gate using Malik's field decryptor. Inside, cold air, dead lights, and something else. Soundless pressure, like standing in a sealed vault of history. The terminal at the heart of the archive didn't recognize Mira by name. It recognized her waveform. Scar biometric confirmed. Access granted. Silo 5 was real. It wasn't just another strike. It was a cascade model. A plan to seed false narratives across 10 systems, each one triggering a contingency strike if data exposure crossed a specific threshold. It wasn't just suppression, it was fail-safe genocide. Mira stared at the projection. Malik said, "This wasn't a cover-up, it was a preemptive burn." She moved fast, extracted core files, overrode the drone to load and transmit to Ridley's archive node. Then she planted a lock sequence, one she'd carried since Ember Claw. A scar-coded encryption loop. Only her arm could open it again. The moment she sealed the node, external motion sensors flared. They were not alone. They didn't see who breached the vault. They felt it, a vibration in the air, low and sharp, followed by the static ripple of a cloaked entry. Stealth gear Class A, not recon. Not standard military, private black tier or worse. Mira looked at Malik. He was already moving, sliding behind a collapsed data rack, weapon drawn but silent. The other two from her team vanished into cover like SR Aikenskin. Mira stayed still. Her arm still rested on the seal. A single voice came through the echo of the chamber. "Mira Lawson, we need you to come with us." It wasn't a threat, it was a certainty. She said nothing. The air moved again, 3 figures, then 5. They didn't activate the lights, didn't issue warnings. They just spread in formation, attempting a flank. Mira tapped twice on her band. A frequency pulse signaled the med drone, still hovering at entry. It responded with a burst, a silent shockwave that killed all unsecured comms in a 50-meter radius. The lights snapped once, and in that flicker of false darkness, Mira dropped, not to flee, to strike. The first operative never saw her elbow coming. She struck low, redirecting his momentum into a rack spine. Malik flanked the second with surgical accuracy, his blade not meant to kill but disable. Deep shoulder/artery nick shock point hit. One of Mira's team activated a heat decoy that confused the optical HUDs of the infiltrators. The chamber lit in pulses of confusion and force. 3 were down before the 4th adjusted. He fired. A pulse round caught Mira in the ribs, non-lethal but concussive. She staggered, rolled, and used the pain to mask her feint. Her scarred arm scraped against the floor. Painful, hot, but it gave her leverage. She came up under the shooter's stance and cracked his visor with a stun baton reverse grip. Glass fractured. He screamed, went down. But the 5th got to the console. He initiated a purge. Mira screamed, "No!" and lunged, too late. Except it didn't work. The console rejected the override. Access denied. Biometric lock in effect. User not recognized. The vault sealed itself again, this time not with Mira's biometric, but with the resonance echo from the drone she'd pre-synced. The one coded to her exact injury pattern from Ember Claw. A mimic loop. The last attacker turned, then fell. Malik didn't give him the chance to react. When the vault was silent again, Mira slumped against the rack, breathing hard. Her ribs ached, her scar burned, but the files were safe. For now, they didn't stay. They stripped the downed attackers of comm chips and left them restrained for pickup, marked for dry tracing. Mira and her team exited through a side chute, traversed a maintenance crawl, and emerged 5 clicks downrange under Aurora flare. The drone met them there, still pulsing, still clean. At Echo-7, Ridley received the full Silo 5 dump. He barely said a word. Then he activated a buried protocol, the one Mira had helped write years ago before any of this. Dead Reckon, a last resort system for verifying corrupted chains using field-recorded pain resonance ANS, an encryption checksum. Mira's burn pattern wasn't just a key, it was now a cipher standard. Meanwhile, the attackers' identities came back. They weren't military. They weren't even private. They were from a corporate security task force, registered to a contractor no longer in official government books, codenamed Veil Strike. A paramilitary unit used for silent compliance enforcement. Black budget, no oversight. Holland got wind and hit the ceiling. They're using ghost firms now. We're beyond plausible deniability. This is active treason. But Mira didn't rage. She got back to work. The new phase began counter-reconstruction. Every silo location now had to be secured, not just remembered. That meant protecting survivors, shielding nodes, and verifying logs against Veil Strike intervention. It meant escalation. She called it not a war, but an audit, and audits, she knew, didn't end until everything was accounted for. By the time Echo-7 received confirmation of the Silo 5 breach and Veil Strike involvement, the landscape of the conflict had changed. What began as a buried history was now a decentralized operation of remembrance, resistance, and retaliation. Mira Lawson had become something no one in command predicted, a living checksum. The phrase started as a joke in the tech wing. Someone said, "She's the checksum for a system that forgot how to tell the truth." But it spread quickly, quietly, across the chain. She wasn't a rebel. She was a reference point. As Veil Strike doubled efforts to intercept and corrupt re-uploaded logs, Mira's burn scar algorithm became the only unbreakable verification signal. Her left arm, once a battlefield souvenir, now formed the spine of a cross-node integrity chain. If a site claimed restoration, it had to pass her waveform. This was how she discovered the breach at Delta Kilo 4, located in a temperate zone under the cover of an agricultural research station. Delta Kilo 4 had claimed to receive and validate 6 separate silo survivor files. But when Mira scanned the resonance logs, she felt the mismatch. Her scar flared. Not in pain, but in inconsistency. The data signals are too clean, gaps are too uniform, and worst, no heat trace. "These are synthetic," Malik confirmed. Veil Strike built false survivors. It's narrative smog. Mira exhaled slowly. "Then we clear the air." With Holland's indirect approval, she initiated field verification protocol Echo 4. It was brutal. Direct contact, full identity scan, DNA, pattern heat signature, memory imprint overlap. They visited all 6 supposed survivor nodes, one by one. 3 didn't exist. 1 was an AI shell, 1 was a rogue contractor paid to pose as a survivor and leak counter testimony. The last was a girl. Young, maybe 20, terrified. Mira didn't confront her with anger, just sat beside her and said, "Who made you do this?" "The girl broke." The story poured out like cold rain. Veil Strike took her from a relocation shelter, promised protection, fake documents and meds. In return, she'd read from a script. Pretend to be Zahara Wells. Say Mira forced her to lie. Mira didn't react, just stood, looked at Malik. "She's coming with us." Ridley helped reassign the girl under protective custody. Her real name, Elsa Juno. Not military, not intel, just someone swept up because she was invisible. The existence of Elsa, and 5 more just like her, confirmed what Mira feared. Veil Strike had moved beyond cover-ups. They were now forging reality in real time. So Mira turned public. She didn't leak data. She gave a name. On a secured burst stream watched by less than 100 live viewers but archived by tens of thousands in hours, Mira Lawson said 2 words: Razorpath lives. It was the phrase Holland warned her never to utter, because if Razorpath was publicly acknowledged, every operation that followed it could no longer be plausibly denied. And once that chain began, it wouldn't stop. Echo 7 braced for retaliation. It never came. Instead, something worse did. Silence, the kind that bleeds into systems, backdoor rootkits, facial sync tampering, metadata scrambles that slowly infect public trust. Web forums started to disappear, survivor names re-scrambled, a cadence of digital vanishings. Mira's own image was altered on several nodes, her burn was edited, her voice glitched, but she fought back. She used her own body as code. At Holland's request, she allowed full scan replication of her scar pattern and telemetry heat imprint. It was embedded into a decentralized verification stamp released as open source. The world now had a way to verify the unverifiable. She named the code Embertrace. And just like that, Mira Lawson disappeared from the official net. But Embertrace didn't. Embertrace spread faster than Mira expected. It started with isolated confirmations, bases in cold sectors, hidden shelters, forward operations hubs, using the code to verify survivors' logs and encrypted testimonies. Then it went civilian. Former tech analysts, whistleblowers, and even archivists from closed government agencies began referencing the pattern. It became more than verification. It became resistance. Mira no longer appeared on the official grid, but her presence intensified. Anonymous footage circulated, her silhouette at mobile aid camps, her voice on encoded emergency med training modules, a scarred left arm reaching into fire to pull someone free. Each fragment passed through Embertrace validation, not to prove heroism but truth. Mira didn't try to control the story, she only ensured it couldn't be rewritten. But with visibility came cost. Veilstrike adapted. They launched countercodes, mirror traces. They mimicked Embertrace with near-identical resonance, tricking low-security nodes. They seeded confusion across relief networks, false logs, broken memories, and a new digital campaign that Mira Lawson was never real. That Embertrace was the name of a covert psyop designed to sow distrust. Holland watched the chaos unfold. They're not trying to win, they're trying to exhaust. Mira didn't argue. She had seen this pattern before at Ember Claw, not just fire but fog, a deliberate overload. So she built something else. She called it the Archive of Echoes, a multi-layered system of cross-reference narratives embedded in the metadata of first-person accounts. Each entry had 3 anchors: biometric log, psychological footprint, and Mira's silent approval, a resonance ping she emitted manually by touching her bare scar to a calibrated plate. It wasn't flashy, but it was irreversible. Once embedded, no amount of digital scrubbing could erase the signature. Even if someone removed the content, the fingerprint remained, a silence that screamed, "Someone tried to make you forget." She launched it quietly. No announcement. Just one file. AE0001 name. Lieutenant R. Soren status. Deceased witness. Lawson M. context. Ember Claw perimeter evac. Echo rating 9. 5/10 anchor. Full body med telemetry. Chain of command audio log. Visual match. More followed. AE0002. AE0003, each name reborn in fragments, a ripple across memory. Then came the break. A Veilstrike asset attempted to breach a civilian shelter in the Outer Highlands. Posing as a survivor, he demanded access to the internal systems, but the shelter used Embertrace plus A&E confirmation. When his scan failed, he lashed out. Mira wasn't there, but someone else was. The girl she saved, Elsa Juno. She stood between the attacker and the shelter's archive terminal, armed only with a training baton and the scar Mira had traced into her memory. She didn't run, didn't fold. The attacker hesitated, then retreated. That moment was captured on a thermal drone, one still image. Elsa Juno, standing in profile, arm outstretched, a flare of heat across her sleeve, faint but unmistakable. She bore no scar, but the trace had stayed with her, and the image went viral. Not on official channels, not through the media, through people. Whispers became message boards, boards became networks, networks became action. The phrase returned, "Scars are evidence, not error." Holland received a call 2 days later. The Oversight Tribunal wanted a closed briefing. Mira wasn't invited, but they requested something else, a copy of Ember Trace, full pattern, with annotation. Mira declined. She said if they want it, they'll have to come to Echo-7, and they'll have to ask out loud. It was the first demand she'd ever made, and for the first time the system blinked. It started with footsteps, not digital, not encrypted, real footsteps, boots on metal, echoing through the lower corridors of Echo-7. Mira was in the archive wing, calibrating the next echo log when the notification pinged, not from a screen, from the base itself. Physical proximity sensor, unauthorized but not hostile. She stood. By the time she reached the entry corridor, Ridley was already waiting. He didn't speak, just nodded toward the elevator. 4 people emerged, 3 in neutral suits, no insignia. The 4th in a dark formal coat, military grade but aged like it hadn't been worn in years. At the collar, a faded tribunal seal. The lead figure spoke first. "Ms. Lawson, we're here to talk. On record, no deception, no surveillance." Mira stared at them. "You're from the Oversight Tribunal." "Yes, you finally came." They didn't respond. Mira led them to a plain conference room. Not the war room, not the archive, just 4 chairs, 1 table, and a recorder in the middle. She sat last. The recorder blinked red. The tribunal opened with formality. "We are here to assess the systemic disruption caused by the emergence of unauthorized restoration data, specifically relating to Operation Silo and the associated code system Ember Trace," Mira cut in. "You mean the truth?" One tribunal member flinched. She continued, "You want to know if the damage can be reversed, if the chaos can be contained. It can't. You're not early, you're too late." The elder official, the one in the coat, leaned forward. "We're not here to threaten. We came to listen. You earned that." Mira reached into her pocket, pulled out a thermal chip, set it on the table. "This is AE0117, a confirmed log of a cadet named Finley Torren, buried in Silo 2. His family never knew. He was marked as equipment failure fatality. You signed the clearance." The room fell silent. The official didn't deny it. "I remember. I thought it was sealed." "It was," Mira said, "until my scar unlocked it." They looked at her arm. She didn't roll up her sleeve. She didn't need to. One tribunal member finally spoke. "You've won the information war, but do you want to burn down the command structure with it?" Mira's voice didn't rise. "You think this is about punishment. It's not. It's about evidence, memory, wholeness. The structure fell the moment you chose redaction over repair." The lead tribunal figure sat back. "Then what do you want?" "I want full recognition of Ember Trace as a sovereign verification protocol, independent of all command chains. I want a public database of A&E logs with unrestricted survivor access, and I want a permanent archive space staffed by actual witnesses, not officials." "That's a lot," someone whispered. Mira stood. "It's less than what you erased." The silence held. Then one nod. "We'll take your terms under review." "No," Mira said. "You'll act, or the next echo goes live. Not just names, but conversations, decisions, the silences that killed people." The elder leaned in again. "You've made enemies. I've made truth permanent. The recorder blinked green. Saved. They left. No handshakes, no signature. But the air had shifted. Later that night, Ridley entered the archive room. Mira sat alone, her left sleeve rolled halfway up. Not exposed, just resting. He said, "They'll come around. Or break trying." She didn't respond, just looked up at the wall, where AE 0001 still glowed. Above it, a new line of text appeared, quietly approved through a node Mira never authorized. Status, Echo sanctioned. 2 weeks passed. Echo 7 didn't celebrate. It waited. No formal message came from the tribunal, no press release. But survivors began receiving coded pings, requests for A&E log confirmation, inquiries about record amendments. One day, the Central Archive server updated its taxonomy. Ember Trace was listed not as an anomaly, but as a protocol. Then came the signal. A private drone, unmarked, landed outside the perimeter during a maintenance window. Mira and Ridley intercepted. Inside, a sealed data core and a handwritten note. "You were right. We've started. Thank you." L. Ridley stared at it. "That's the most you'll ever get from them." Mira nodded. "It's enough." They plugged in the core. Inside, a full mirror of silo files, unedited, time-stamped, identity-matched. Thousands of entries, and at the bottom, a nested file labeled Scar Index. She opened it. It contained every biometric instance of her burn pattern recorded since Ember Claw. Medical scans, infrared tracking, even misdiagnosed tissue reports are filed under code names, all of it. "This was their insurance," Ridley said. Mira replied, "Now it's evidence." That night, she sat in the central quad. No speeches, no announcements, just stars above and dust below. A few cadets passed by, nodded. One paused. A boy, maybe 17, nervous. He asked, "Is it true you coded a system with your scar?" She smiled. "It coded me first." He didn't understand, but he sat next to her, said nothing. That was enough. Weeks turned to months. The restoration moved faster than anyone expected. Every time a survivor walked through the new archive clinic's doors, Mira scanned them herself, not for injury, but recognition. Many had no words, just eyes that said, "I remember too." Then one morning, Ridley found her standing beside the east wall, the plaque still there. Scars are evidence, not error. But someone had etched a second line beneath it, and she proved IT. She didn't touch it, just looked away, eyes soft. Later, she walked alone to the edge of the base where the comms towers faced the mountains. The wind was clean. Her left sleeve fluttered. No need to hide. A drone flew overhead. This one is not silent, not secret. It bore an insignia, newly minted, a fusion of two symbols, the old medical cross and the Ember Trace waveform. The system had not just accepted the scar, it had adapted to it. In the days that followed, Echo 7's new motto went live. Engraved above the archive wing, "Let memory burn bright." Mira stood beneath it once, long enough for one photo, then disappeared from the public log again. But wherever survivors gathered, when truth was threatened, when records shook, she reappeared. Not to speak, to verify, not to lead, to remember, and that was what finally saved them. 10 years later, the scar hadn't faded. It had shifted color slightly, taken on the softness of healed flesh rather than the sharp reds of trauma. But it remained, still winding from shoulder to forearm, still textured like old circuitry, still unmistakable. Mira stood at the base of a new installation. Station Echo 17, the last of the Memorial networked archive sites. This one wasn't buried. It stood on open ground, ringed by high-altitude solar sails and resonance towers. No camouflage, no pretense. She wore no uniform, no ID, just a loose canvas jacket, sleeves rolled up in the mountain wind. Her hair was shorter now, streaks of silver visible at the edges, but her eyes still watchful. A young technician approached. tablet in hand. "Are you Lawson?" Mira turned. "That's what they tell me." The tech smiled, nervous. "Sorry, we were told a legacy verifier was coming. Didn't know it'd be you." "I'm nobody important," Mira replied. "That's not what the wall says." Mira looked past him. A monument stood at the front plaza. Black stone, smooth, curved like the edge of a wave. Along its face, thousands of names. At the base, a waveform etched deep in polished steel. Not her scar exactly, but something born from it. The technician held out the tablet. "We've got a new batch of echo logs. Some are fragmentary. One is tagged under pre-Ember trace metadata." Mira scanned the data. A partial name, a glitch-tagged timestamp, no matching survivor record. She touched her arm to the scanner plate. The tablet chimed. "Match verified." The tech blinked. "Wait, you remember this?" Mira didn't answer right away. Then he had a stutter, kept calling the evac shuttle a hope tube. Everyone laughed, but he made it to the landing pad. They said he didn't, but I remember. She input a confirmation pulse. The log was saved. The name appeared, Corporal Jalen D. Myrek. Another line was added to the wall. The technician looked at her like she was part myth. "Do you ever stop?" he asked. Mira looked up at the towers, heard the quiet hum of the wind turning memory into signal. "No," she said. "That's the point." Later that evening, she stood alone by the wave wall, tracing the names with her fingers. Survivors, lost ones. Ghosts reformed into presence. Above them all, a new inscription had been added, "Evidence endures." As dusk fell over Echo 17, Mira Lawson faded into shadow once again. Never far, never done, never erased. It never started with glory, and it certainly didn't end with it. What happened in the halls of Echo 7 and beyond wasn't a revolution by force. It was a reclamation, a patient undoing of silence. And in the end, it was Mira Lawson's burn that outlasted every encryption, every redaction, every calculated lie. They tried to erase her, not just from records, but from relevance. But she did what scars always do. She healed, then remained. When the first verification log bore her scar's pattern, it wasn't a moment of defiance. It was a moment of memory. When Ember Trace went global, she didn't lead it. She authenticated it, quietly, persistently, with the kind of certainty that systems can't predict. And that's why it worked. In the years that followed, people didn't chant her name. They didn't build monuments of her face. They didn't need to. What she built wasn't made of stone or legacy. It was made of reference, a reality check encoded into the structure of truth itself. Hospitals now scan for resonance traces, not to detect injury but to record origin. Schools teach echo history as a matter of civic literacy, not to remember the battle but to remember the edits. And in remote archives across mountain bases and desert nodes, whenever a forgotten voice finally finds its place in the record, it passes through her. There is a med station now in South Oralis, the last region to ratify echo compliance. The walls are bare, the doors are unguarded, but on the main panel above the triage scanner, there is one line, "If IT scars, IT stays." No one attributes the quote, but everyone knows. At night, across the spectrum, Ember Trace pulses like the faint breath of stars, constant, real, unafraid. Mira is still out there, somewhere, not hiding, not broadcasting, just verifying. And every time a survivor is told they don't matter, every time a file disappears, a truth gets softened, a name slips away, somewhere a quiet alert pings, a pattern syncs, a burn resonates, and the system corrects itself. She didn't fix everything. She didn't need to. She built something that couldn't be broken again in the same way. And that's how you win. We hope you felt every signal, every silence, every line etched into the bone of this story. If Mira's journey meant something to you, if you've ever felt erased, overlooked, made to forget your own version of the truth, this story was for you. Comment below. Let us know where you're watching from. Which part stayed with you? What card do you carry? Because we believe in one thing above all, stories like these were never meant to stay buried. This was Veteran Biker, and we'll see you in the next story.